Has anyone ever asked you to prove something that you know how to do?
I think I might be able to hula hoop around the block.
Prove it! Prove it! Prove it!
So, to start, what I know will be everyone's favorite topic, proofs, we are going to do what's called an algebraic proof. So we are going to solve this equation, but we get to write all of the reasons for all the statements that we write. So that's fun. So, you've actually done proofs in algebra, and we will review some of these properties. And there will be lots of properties that we will talk about in geometry. Aren't you excited? First one is the addition property of equality, which says if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. Okay, so you can add the same thing to both sides. Subtraction property of equality and multiplication property of equality are similar. You can subtract the same thing on both sides of the equal sign, and you can multiply by the same thing on each side of the equal sign. The division property is the same thing, except C cannot equal 0 because you can't divide by 0. Ask Siri, she'll tell you funny things if you try to divide by 0. The reflexive property says A equals A. So that means that like the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle A. Okay, you equal your own self, basically. If you look in the mirror, you see your reflection. So that's one way to remember that. The symmetric property of equality is similar, but you're looking at two different things. So if A equals B, then B equals A. Okay, so if the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B, then the measure of angle B is equal to the measure of angle A. And then the transitive property uses three objects. If A is equal to B and B equals C, then A is equal to C. And the substitution property of equality you've used before, if A is equal to B, then B can be substituted for A and vice versa. And then the distributive property, if you take A times the quantity B plus C, then that's the same thing as A, B plus AC. See, you've already done this. Okay, so we're going to start. This is our step number 1, and that is given to us. So I am going to write given. Yay. Okay, so now our step number 2. I noticed that there are parentheses, so I'm going to take this 2 and multiply it by the x and the 4. Okay, because I'm distributing. So we have 2x plus 8 plus 2x equals 12. And that's the distributive property of equality. So I'm just going to write the prop of equality equals. Prop of equals. All right, next. I see that I can combine like terms. And I can write this a couple different ways. You can write your reasons in different ways as long as you show that you know what you're doing. So I'm going to say 4x plus 8 equals 12. Okay, and I combine like terms. So I'm just going to go CLT for combine like terms. Okay, and that's just doing the math. So if you want to write doing the math, or if you want to write simplify for just doing the math, that's fine too. Okay, next. Looks like I'm going to subtract 8 on both sides. Okay, so since I subtracted from both sides, the same thing, I'm going to call that the subtraction property of equality. So I'm going to go prop of equals. All right, we're doing pretty well here. Now, I see that we're almost done. Okay, all I have to do is divide by 4 on both sides, and I get x equals 1. And since I divided by 4 on each side, I'm going to write the div prop of equals. And that's it! You guys did your first proof. Woohoo! What about something like this? What to do? Well, the first thing you'll need to do is show that the two smaller pieces have a sum of the larger segment. So segment NM, the length of segment NM plus the length of segment MO is equal to the length of segment NO. And that's called the segment addition postulate. Then you could put the numbers and symbols in instead of the segments. So we've got 2x plus 3x minus 9 is equal to the 4x minus 4. And that's called the substitution property of equality. Okay, and then we're just going to do the algebra. So we'll combine like terms next. And then look, we get to subtract 4x. So that's the subtraction property of equality. And we have x minus 9 equals negative 4. Then we just add 9 to both sides, and that's called the addition property of equality. And we've solved. Yay! We did it. And finally, I believe that you are ready for your very first geometric proof. Aren't you excited? So we have this figure, we have this angle, and some given statements. N is the midpoint of segment MP, Q is the midpoint of segment RP, and segment PQ is congruent to segment NM. And we are trying to prove that segment PN is congruent to segment QR. All right, so we start with N is the midpoint of segment MP. All right, that is given. It is listed up in the given information, so that's the reason. Okay, so if you ever don't know what to do, at least start with the given statements because, you know, those will be right. Okay, then it says Q is the midpoint of segment RP. Again, up there, given. Next, it says segment PN is congruent to segment NM. Well, it does say that N is the midpoint. So if N is the midpoint, that means those two pieces are congruent. Okay, so since that is because of the midpoint, I'm going to write definition of midpoint. Next, it says segment PQ is congruent to segment NM. Well, segment PQ is congruent to segment NM. Well, I seem to see that up there. Okay, so that is also a given statement. And then it says segment PN is congruent to segment PQ. Segment PN is congruent to segment PQ. Well, if we look over here, it says that segment PN is congruent to NM. It also says that segment PQ is congruent to segment NM. So if they're both congruent to the same thing, then that means they have to be congruent to each other, right? Okay, so that would be either, I would say either the transitive property or substitution would be okay here.
Okay, so I'm going to say the transitive property of congruence, since we're talking about figures being congruent to each other. Okay.
And then with the transitive property and substitution, you should write what steps that comes from. And since that came from these two steps above, I'm going to say steps 3 and 4. All right, we're almost there.
Where are you?
And now we will move on to the next statement that says segment PQ is congruent to segment QR. So that's these two. And we already said that Q is the midpoint. Okay, and so that would be again the definition.
Midpoint. And then
Our final step that we are trying to prove is that segment PN is congruent to segment QR. And again, we have segment PN congruent to segment PQ and also segment QR congruent to segment PQ. Okay, so again, this is going to be the transitive property from the two steps above.
transitive prop of congruence from steps 3, 2, 5, and 6.
And you did it! You just completed your first geometric proof. Sorry about all the background noise, but you did great. So since now you have lots of practice with proofs, the next time someone tells you to prove something, you just say, all right, I will.